So hello, everybody. I love the sound that I interrupt every time I get up here because it means that people are having a great time before they even start. So wonderful. Good to see you all. I'm Ellie Shore, and I've been running art salons for more than 5.5 years now at the Armory. Nadine Saitlin is someone that I've known for a while, a little bit. And I've admired her work. I saw a two-person show that she was part of at the Eissey campus, Palm Beach State College Gallery last year, curated by Carla Walter, who was here. And I was blown away by the work. It was fascinating. It was painting and drawing and sculpture and had a primitive feeling to it that intrigued me. And it filled 4 walls of the gallery with just so much invention and fascination, using so many different kinds of materials. And after looking at the work, I was talking to Nadine, and she was in a circle with a bunch of friends, and she was talking about the work with so much excitement and enthusiasm and articulateness. And I look for that in someone that I invite to speak at Art Salon. So I invited her to speak, and I've gotten to know her a little better since then. Nadine has a long history, both as an artist and as an art educator and an advocate in the arts. She has homes in Florida and in Chicago, but has spent most of her life, I think, in the Midwest, and has 2 master's degrees, one from the University of Illinois in Champlain, and one from Michigan State University in East Lansing. And she's been working since then. She was an associate professor at Chicago State University and was the executive director of the Illinois Alliance for the Arts, which is an art advocacy program. So she's had a very broad impact on people in her region of the country in the world of art. I hope she'll be talking about that a little bit tonight. She'll also be talking about her work and how she creates the things that she does. Please welcome Nadine Saitlin.
Thank you, Ellie. It's such a pleasure to be here. And since I've seen the salon and seen the wonderful artists who have spoken here and been part of the program, I just feel very privileged that you have invited me to be part of this tonight. All of that was a mouthful in terms of my education and where I've been. And hopefully I can shed some light on how the things that I've done in education has influenced my art making. As a young woman, I started at the Art Institute of Chicago, and I see fellow artists here from there, very proud to be a graduate from there. You too? It was a very interesting beginning for me because when I graduated high school, I went directly into a professional art school. And for those who know those kinds of programs, you spend 5 days a week, 6 hours a day making art. It's just total immersion. And this was my campus. The school was my campus at that time. All the classrooms were behind the museum, and we would walk right through the museum to go to get to history lectures. We'd walk through the museum, talk about paintings. It was a growing up with art. And the kinds of things I was doing in that program then, and these I took all from their site, it goes to illustrate the kind of program they ran. It was a classical education in terms of your drawing and anatomy, but it was also heavily influenced by the Bauhaus. And for those of you who have heard of the Bauhaus and know of the influence of this German movement, it changed the way many art schools approached art. We did a little bit of everything. We never separated the crafts from the drawing. It was all part of that, as well as the classical education at the same time. And the reason I'm spending time with that, you'll see how those various influences come to play in my artwork. Ellie was kind enough to mention my work experiences. When I graduated from the Art Institute, I wanted to be a potter. And I don't think I was a very good potter, but I loved the material. And my parents, who influenced me greatly through my college education, said, you know, we think you need to do something when you graduate that's a little more dependable than making pots. And so they pushed for me to go into education. I shouldn't say push, they strongly suggested I graduate with an education degree along with my bachelor's work at the Art Institute. I started teaching and had from that moment on wonderful experiences that not many people have an opportunity to do. I became associated with an educational laboratory, and we developed educational materials in the arts, making books, records, toys, in all of the arts. So I worked with dancers and poets and drama people and music people. And one of the lessons that I learned from that is that one of the most important things we can share with children is the idiosyncratic aspect of what it is that we do. Why is visual arts so special? What is it? How do we get children to see and appreciate what it is that is about art making? The other opportunity I had, and this is a complicated thing, but there was money in those years in the Office of Education. It came from various sources, and the Endowment for the Arts transferred some money into the education program because they had the money, and they felt that they didn't know exactly how to begin setting up an education program. And the laboratory where I was working established the first visual arts artist-in-residence program. And that was also another incredibly important aspect of what I saw, because we went around the country placing artists in schools, and ultimately that same artist-in-residence program is the one you see today in the arts councils, offering monies to schools to be able to bring artists in to share their processes. So the artistic process, being part of an educational process, became extremely important to my way of thinking about what education should be. Lastly, although I was not making art of my own during those years, I was making art. I was designing books. In fact, when I was teaching at Chicago State, I was the designer for the School of the Art Institute. I did their catalogs. So I always had my hand in art making, although it may not have been for my own ends. Today I'm going to try to go through 3 different approaches that I use. They are not sequential. I work on all 3 of these things back and forth at various times in my life, and you will see that they're very different. And when Ellie invited me to talk today, she said, I'm really interested in your explaining how I do this. So I'll start with the good earth. And I grew up my whole life in Chicago. I saw big buildings. That was my world, busy streets. And in 1985, my husband and I came to Florida, bought a home, and I spent a lot of time outside on the golf course collecting things. This became my palette. I collected petrified wood, reeds, things from banyan trees, and I found materials that I felt worked with those things I found. So every time I picked up one of these things and it reminded me of something, what I would do would be to use the commensurate materials to make it realer, make it concrete, make it part of an experience that I was seeing and sharing it with somebody else. So I use the feathers and the raffia and the wrappings as ways to make my objects understood by a greater public. These are all very small. They're about 4 by 6 in size. They're mounted on small canvases. And I also found as I named them, it became more concrete as to what it was that I was thinking about as I was making them. This is just a piece of wood, a shape that I picked up that reminded me of a fish shape, and through paint and incising, adding the feathers and beads, I became involved in thinking about it as a fish, and mounted it on the plexiglass and ultimately found a man who makes plexiglass boxes so that I could cover them and show them. Each one, I think, is unique. The beading is used in various ways. Usually it's just one object. In the case of betrothed, I took 2 pieces of wood that just fit together and wrapped them up to make a unit out of the 2. Somebody once said to me after I did it was, "You got them facing apart." And I went, well, that's the way they fit together, so that was it. Having this art taken seriously became another challenge. What I decided to do was take these wonderful pieces of wood. This is a petrified piece of wood. Add the feathers, add the beading to it, make it even more beautiful. But I wanted it taken seriously. And at that point, I decided I would do drawings of them. I would do portraits. Portrait is something that really gives immortality to the object. And this way, it became more important, and it created something else for me. It let people, or made people, if they were looking at it, compare the two and really look. And this is sort of my educational thing coming back out again. How do you get somebody to really look at what it is that you're making? Not just buzz through, walk through, but take the time to look at the two together. And I said something at the show, at Carla's show. I said, I don't even care if they tell me I missed something or this is wrong. But I know by having the comparison that they're really looking what I'm doing. So in a way, it's a sort of an educational journey that I'm doing and the viewer is doing at the same time. I went through many different kinds of things that I was making. The tool chest, and there was only 6 tools, became the subject of the painting, of the drawing, again and again. I want to say at this point, I think of myself as a drawer. Most people say they're a painter. I think of myself as a drawer, and I take drawing into my painting. The first approach is always with the pen, the pencil, making the mark. I always think it's amazing that we are able to, with making a mark on paper, create a magic that looks real, that feels real, that has texture, that has space, that has volume. The tools was one strand. The use of the wrapping, in this case, became sticks, became what I call silent rain sticks, and then the drawing, again, I'm still using the same materials, but I'm reinterpreting them again and again. The idea of protection, taking care of the environment. This particular piece I did when I had a studio in Chicago, and it was very weird because I was walking to the studio one day and I found this carton on the ground that coffee cups were put in. And it reminded me of egg crate, coffee cup crate, just to protect. It was a symbol of protection. And I was collecting things, of course, on the golf course, and I would come home with these, in this case, these nuts that I had found. And I decided if I put them together, it would be making a statement about how we can protect the environment and the things in the environment. I reached out to fill them with something, I don't know if people know what it is today, Excelsior, which when I was a young woman growing up, they would package glasses in it when they shipped them. It was a very old-fashioned way of protecting something. And then, of course, the fence. The drawing was done from above, looking very close. You'll notice that in all of these to this point, I'm dealing with just a white background. I love the idea of having these things grow right out of the piece of paper. We were talking about hurricanes. I have lived through one and almost lived through 2 because we set up our show at the Eissey Gallery the day before the hurricane came. But this was a drawing I had done after the first hurricane and using the symbol of the Band-Aid as a protection, of putting it back together again. I'm going to run through the next ones because I also want to share with you my other body of work, which is entirely different from this. But this is a background that this whole thing was done with pencil, and it's about, what did I say, 30 by 40 or 29 by 42. And I really loved having that drama of the black and the pieces coming out of the black. And here, although I'm using the twigs, I've used them just as an inspiration for forms moving in space. So the black background becomes important and is something you'll see me use again. The emotionality of the objects is something that I also really have fun playing with. And this is a piece that I found that I just thought was just screaming to be saved, and tried to capture that. This is a little later piece in that I am loosening up. I'm doing more pastel. I'm still using pencil. I'm using pastel pencil on it, still on drawing paper. And at this juncture, Carla was nice enough to invite me to the show. And I walked into her gallery, I think, Vicki, when you were having the show, and I looked around at all these wonderful big walls and tried to imagine what I would put on the walls. Beautiful lighting, beautiful walls, and here I have these very small pieces and some larger drawings, and I decided I wanted to do a wall of very large drawings. So I took those pieces that are, this piece is 26 by 12 by 7, this piece here, the drawing, and you see me in process of the drawing, is 48-36. So these are very, very large drawings. You can see the process of my drawing and then putting the paint in. Now I'm using paint. I'm using pastel crayon and pastel pencil, and I'm doing push and pull of the surface. I'm still working on paper. I took the large sheets of paper and mounted them on 48 by 36 canvases. And then the person who made plexiglass boxes built me boxes to cover these. I did 3, and they were on the back wall in Carla's gallery. This is the second one. And again, the same process was used in this particular drawing. Again, looser in feel, more pastel, more paint being used, and spray painting the background now. And this was the third, the striding figure. And she was really big and very, I think, very engaging. While I was wrapping, I also discovered gourds. I mean, it was like a piece of my pottery. The forms are just absolutely elegant. In case you don't know, a gourd is from the pumpkin family. It's very, very hard, very, very sturdy. Primitive cultures use them for bowls to use for eating, for dining, for holding. So it's a very utilitarian thing. And Carla matched me up with a potter. And I decided how perfect. So I took this gourd and I did a painting of it, which is 30 by 40. And I felt that that was uniting what I was doing with what the potter was doing in the same show. I show you the process of how I masked the painting and then spray painted around it to get the black, and then removing the mask and seeing the painting revealed against the black background. Okay, I'm going to segue here to a second body of work, which is distinctly different from the first, and it deals with my abstract drawing imaging. I never show both of the works together because they're just so different and so discrete that instead of enlightening, I think it causes confusion. So if I enter a show and bring some, or have a show, I will either show the abstract paintings or the good earth. And let me show you what I mean by that. Pencil is my thing. I love pencil. I've learned to use other things, but I'm a drawer. And consequently, being able to draw realistically or being able to draw freely and expressively with a pencil, it's something that I carry with me, and I carry with me even when I'm starting to paint. I said that as a woman going to school, the influences that I saw, these were the painters. As I walked through the galleries, I would see the beautiful forms of Miro, the way Kandinsky freed us from even having a subject matter. His was all about music. It liberated my vision, so I was able to, as time went on, and I wanted to do more painting of my own, felt pretty secure in moving in a more abstract way. So I have a body of work which now is all about these forms that are whimsical, about space, about flow, about capturing energy, and being able to give you images that you can build the story in your mind. The ideas are there. It's up to you to pull them together and live with the work itself. This is sort of moving through materials as well. The one on the left is, in fact, all three of them are done on canvas. I painted on canvas, and then I work with pastel and pen. Now, that's not very stable. So I used a lot of fixative to hold them into place, but knew that I was not going to have a future in doing pastel on canvas, although these still live. They still live, believe me. And at this point, I want to say just a few things about shows and showing my work. I like to show my work. I enter my work in shows. I deal with I'm looking at my artist friends out there who all know about putting something in a show, getting it accepted, or getting it rejected, and then putting it in another show and finding out it's accepted. But I always feel by putting something in a show, there is a validation of what I'm thinking about, a validation about getting it out there, getting exposure to what it is that I'm doing. This was my biggest award, the smallest piece up there, 14 by 14, won the prize in the Boca Raton Museum show. So you can't know exactly what it is that's going to resonate with the judge, but it certainly gives you a sense of validation when it does resonate with the judge. Of course, I've tried my hand at abstract expressionism, and in doing that, I'm literally drawing with paint. I find, although I've done this kind of work, that I really like to be more in control of what it is that I do. It's the nature of how I approach a work. So the next works I'm going to show you, there's a lot more control involved. I'm dealing with spatial vision. I'm trying to work through, in fact, the one on the right started as a collage where I'm trying to create almost like a stage set and have you play in the space back and forth like you would see a play happening. The looking window, how you would look through something and around something at the same time, but yet all of these have forms in there that are very abstract, very biomorphic, one person called it. The material is acrylic paint on paper, pen, pastel, and then sprayed and held. And now they go under frames. Thematically, I start doing something, and those images will go from 2 or 3 or 4 works as I'm playing with what the images are about. The one on the left is acrylic paint, pencil, back to pencil, pastel. The one on the right is only acrylic paint. But it's pass, it's movement. It's trying to capture the energy and the movement on a flat piece of paper of a third-dimensional happening. Public art is terrific. I love it. This piece went into the airport at Palm Beach, and the fact that artwork can be lived with and people can be part of it was very important to me. This is, again, a spatial vision where I'm working with forms and how they play on the surface and how I capture the energy, and a process. Matte color. The sketch you see here on the left is 2 different sketches. I have sketchbooks filled all the time. I'm always drawing, So those are cut, and sometimes I'll take something I've drawn, I'll cut, I'll move them around, I'll change the composition. With the advent of the iPhone, I take pictures of everything. I can do printouts now from things from my sketchbook. I can cut and I can move them around to really play with the composition. And here you see me transferring that composition again onto paper. So this is matte, acrylic matte paint on paper, 30 by 40, and I call it Off the Easel. I name the work when I'm done, and it's just a clue to what I was thinking about when I did it. So you can play with that and see how that goes. This is the second piece I did in the series. This one I call Out of the Sketchbook. And again, the validation is very fine. Cecily just gave me the award that this one won in Ocala last week. So again, I feel this new work is being validated by people who are looking at it. I've mentioned a couple of times about art you can live with. More and more I hear from people, oh, I love your work, but I have no space for it. That seems to be a cry that we hear from people. But it's not only that, it's I want to get my things into places where people can appreciate it and live with it. And I started to went back to the gourds and started to paint gourds. And I think this comes now full circle. My pottery, surface of drawing, paint on a form, the third dimensional form. We were talking just earlier before this started. When I enter these into shows as paintings on gourds. I never think of them as being utility pieces. I think of them as artwork on third dimensional surfaces. And then ironically, the piece called The Big Dance just won an award at the JCC show as a crafts award. So now we can all think about how we blur the lines on what we call crafts, what we call fine art. The gourd it's an amazing natural thing. I get them from farms. I send away for them from various farms. Growing season, I know growing seasons now. The one on the top is what I do with it when I get it. I have to cut the top off, cut the seeds out, line it with a matte varnish, although I don't want you to put water in it, but I will. It is sealed inside. And then I treat it like a canvas. I put a white surface on it. I find that acrylic holds better than gesso. I do the surface and then I draw on it, and then I paint it. What comes first, the painting or the gourd? Sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's the other way. But when I'm working with images, they stay in my head and they reappear in different ways. So there's continuity in the images that I'm working on at that time. I show you this one because, again, it's space, it's motion, it's flow, it's energy, how you capture that. But ironically, I was working on this gourd at the same time, which is a third dimensional. And I had to go back and look at when I photographed it because I couldn't remember whether or not I painted the gourd first or the painting first, because it was such a unified kind of conceptual thing that was going on in my brain. This is what our home looks like. We have a studio section in the front of the house, and like many of you, it has migrated onto the various walls in the home. So we live with my art. And then this past April, which will be a year ago soon, I was approached by a company called Art Vita to put my artwork on clothing and accessories, and nothing could have been more perfect for me because of my desire to get my work out there. So you can see where when I do transfer stuff, I think only in one or two places I've ever used a whole painting. I have the luxury of being able to select out from a painting compositionally things that I believe work in the application. And it's a fascinating process. I'm learning more about how they do it because they give you a template. You never see the work. You never check a color. They give you a template. You take a photo of your painting. You select what you want on the piece, you transfer it onto the piece, and the next thing you know, you can go look at my page, and there's now 50 some items on the page, and you can go and you can order it. And when you get it, it's the first time I have seen how that actually looks. So there's a little scariness. But you can see the range of things that one can do. Nobody I know posed for that. They did that for me. And you can see the selection onto pillows, onto a small purse, and onto tops. I went the other day to take a look at what was going on, because they give you a sheet. And to date, they have sold 80 pieces. So I know that I am getting a reach that I would not have done otherwise. And I know people are buying it and enjoying it. I have a friend from our club, a much older lady who is not going to buy artwork anymore. And she bought one of the tote bags, and she says, I have it hanging on the doorknob of my den. So, you know, my art is getting into places it wouldn't have gotten into any other way, and that's satisfying. Little handbags, big handbags. I always get a kick out of it when somebody says, well, could you make that one just a little bit bigger? So, you know, no. This is how it comes, guys. This is it. I want to leave you with where things are going and where and how I have to solve problems to think about how I want to deal with it. This spring, we bought a pad that I could draw on. So this was my first digital drawing experience. And I'm a drawer, it's easy. But what I did was I started to take things out of my sketchbook up here, drop it into the program, which is called Procreate, and began manipulating it with color and changing things in ways that I could have never done before in my life. I mean, my way of working before, because I work on paper, I'd take a photo of what I'm working on, do a printout, work with some pens and see what I want to do, because you can't rework paper a lot. It's, you know, you maybe get 2 cracks at it and that's it. So I'm used to reworking things, but nothing like this. I mean, I drop the drawing into the pad, start doing color fills and moving things around and cutting things, and it's amazing. Now, I'm showing you one application is that I just put it on a handbag, you know, because it just seemed, this image just seemed right for doing that. But what if I want to show that one as a work of art? What do I do with it? Do I make a digital print of it? Is that then considered fine art? Do I repaint it when it's already done on the pad? So the question becomes the next step of how we use this amazing piece of equipment in the world of fine arts. So I leave you with that thought. If anybody has the answer, you can please let me know. With that, I'm going to conclude. I know you saw a lot of images, and I know that Ellie likes to sit down and have people talk about what it is that you have questions about. So,
Thank you very much. This was fascinating.
thank you.